So today we're working on a student's tiller, and preliminary diagnosis showed me that we didn't have spark. So student had taken a few things apart, and what I want to do is I'm just going to double check to make sure that everything is back where it's supposed to be. So, knowing that we don't have spark, using our spark tester, I just checked that yesterday. So we're going to double check it again. I'm going to take the spark plug out so we don't have quite so much compression, and I'll put a spark tester on there. That being the case, what I'm going to look at is I want to make sure that this ground that goes to the coil isn't acting up, and by chance maybe it's thinking it's in the stop position. So we're just going to check a few things along the way as we're doing this. But I can see where the fuel tank had come off. We've got a couple of bolts back here that look a little cross-threaded, so we'll get that tank out of our way also. Using a spark plug socket, that way as we come out of here it'll hold on to that spark plug for us. Just like so. And I believe these tank bolts are going to be 10 millimeter. Noticing some different lengths here. So we're going to recheck these threads once this is off, because the bolts weren't quite in all the way, and it looks like something that would be really easy to cross thread. And there's also a clip back here that I'm going to show you that holds the oil fill tube. We'll do that with this camera. So that's the clip. This is where those bolts were at. And the way this was set up, the clip wasn't wrapped around that oil dipstick tube. So we'll be sure and put that back whenever we put the tank back in. Okay, so that just slides right out of a slot, and we don't have a way to turn that fuel off going down to the carburetor. So we're going to do a little different trick here. I'm going to take this oil dipstick tube and dipstick out just to give us some room. And I'm going to just balance this tank off to the side. What I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to get access to this cover right here. Underneath that's our flywheel, and that's where we're going to be able to access the coil So now we're not going to have that compression. We're going to be able to spin this over. We'll look using our spark tester. Got to get a good ground. And I'm not seeing a bit of spark. So we have to see what's going on here. We're going to have to disconnect a couple of things with this plate. Now this plate, with how it operates, you'll see this movement. And whenever we come all the way back to stop, that is what will touch this little switch and grounds it out. So electricity follows path of least resistance. That means that the coil isn't going to get its primary charge and it's not going to fire. So it's just barely touching right there. And I have to be honest, I'm not seeing any activation right there at all. This very possibly could be the case that this switch is not operating properly. But let's do an actual test and see exactly what's going on. So we're going to take our multimeter. We're checking resistance. What I want to see is, am I getting resistance to ground, no resistance to ground? What exactly is going on? Because if this switch is grounded out, we're not going to get any spark. So what I'm looking at is 0.02 on the ohm scale. So that means that we're shorted to ground no matter what position this switch is in. And I think we need to get this cover off of here so we can see what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and pull this cable also. Just to get that out of the way. And you want to be careful. Get a good visual of how all these springs go down by this governor, because that's what sets your speeds. And you don't want that to get too tight because it'll over rev the engine. So make sure you get those back right. Okay. So now, this is kind of a cheater's way of trying this. We don't want that grounded out. So now if it's not hooked up to the case, we know it's not grounded out. And by rights, looky there. By rights, it should fire. But I just found something else. And it's possible that someone else might have been in here and had this cover off. And if that's the case, the ground wire, or kill wire if you will, is supposed to go through this area up here. But as you can see, it got pinched right here. And if that's the case and it's pinched to ground, there's no way that we're going to be able to get the coil to fire. So what I'm going to do is I'll pull this cover off real fast, and I'm going to look at that wire. If it needs a repair, we'll repair it. This wraps up part 1 on Cameron's tiller project, so be sure and look for part 2 next.